Thank you so much, Reva, for agreeing to be on this podcast. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Same here.
Great. So let's get started. So you've been working in the public relations space for more than 10 years now. You've worked with a range of brands, right? Could you share your experience of working with nonprofits in this space?
The non-profit sector works very differently when it comes to public relations as compared to, say, a product or a service in the B2B or the B2C side. And that is because, it comes with so many riders. Like you need to have some sort of a, a different level of sensitivity while working with these clients because there could be organizations working with young children, there could be organizations working with certain spreading awareness around certain diseases. There could be organizations on the environment conservation side, so on and so forth. So I think it just, as a PR professional, I have felt that it requires a different type of sensitivity and sensibility when it comes to working with the social sector.
So typically, nonprofits do not really engage with PR professionals, right? Like either, I think organization would reach out to a PR professional maybe in two situations. One is when there's like a fundraising campaign or something of that sort, or when there is a crisis, right? So I want to ask a very basic and a very fundamental question. Why should nonprofits engage with a PR agency or a PR professional in the first place?
I think, first of all, the founders or the organizations should be clear as to what is their goal from the PR efforts. As you correctly mentioned, many a times there are just very lean, smaller projects that they want to do when there is a fundraising campaign. But does that solve their purpose as an organization? I would, beg to differ that, that doesn't solve any purpose for them because in no way are they able to showcase their work in an engagement of 2 to 3 months, which is very focused on just targeting the investor or a particular stakeholder who's ready to fund any of the causes that they stand for. I mean, in today's day and generation, you also come from a journalism background, Simit. We all know that there are ways to identify what's fake and what's not, what's just a push on social media or through PR efforts, and what is a genuine cause. And then, of course, even from a story standpoint, there's just as much glossing that you can do, as a PR professional and reach out to media houses. And of course, people sitting on the other side of the table, like yourself and other esteemed journalists in the fraternity, they have their own ways and means to research and to check facts and figures, right? So I don't think that doing PR for a very limited time frame makes any sense for a social sector organization. I do understand that there might be issues on the fund side, on the funding side as well, in order to sustain these efforts on the communication side. But we always have alternatives. We can have volunteers, we can have brainstorm sessions, we can phase out execution into different times as and when required. However, doing very limited targeted PR to say that, hey, I am supporting cause A, and why don't you give me money to take that cause or that awareness campaign forward? It's not that easy, and your stakeholders are not that foolish, to say it simply.
You raised like quite a few issues which I would want to go with you like as we move forward. But just to understand, so typically when you're doing like strategy for a PR campaign, like what are those components that you look at when it comes to designing a strategy? Could you maybe walk us through that?
Sure. Any organization that comes to us with a request to do public relations, we first try and understand what is it that they want out of those PR efforts. Do they just want to build thought leadership of the founders because, say, the founder has some novel ideas or has an opinion that he wants the masses to resonate with, and then media becomes the vehicle to do it, and we become the agents to reach out to media houses to get it done. So that's one way of looking at it. The other is that, do you want do you want some sort of financial support, say from investors, then the kind of tactics and the kind of strategy that goes into designing a campaign, it's very different. Even the kind of publications that we deal with, it might not be something that you see on a Facebook, but probably something that you see on a LinkedIn. It's not something that you will see on a scoop book, but something that you might see in a business today. So that's the difference that I would like to point out, that depending upon the aim, objective, and the stakeholders that you are targeting, that's how an entire strategy is sketched right at the onset of the engagements that we take up for our social sector or even any other sector's client. And then, of course, it's a matter of execution. Now, within that, one of the important hooks that come in is the content part. It's about what sort of content are you writing, in what style of English or any other vernacular language, and is it media friendly or not? Is it good enough to tell your story in a manner that it does resonate with a journalist, or even from their readership standpoint, if it makes sense for them to take a particular pitch or a lead forward? And that's how it works. The reach and readership of a mainline versus something in the digital space versus something that you're trying to target in an application of sorts, like say an in shorts. The word count, the tonality, the objective, and the readership all would be very different. And that's what we want to focus on at the strategy stage, after having understood from the client what their requirement and target audience is. These two keywords.
You talked about target audiences, right? So normally when any organization wants to, do PR, they are unsure as to, who should be the right target audience, right? Because you would want to reach out to as many people as you want. So from an organization's point of view, if one has to, work on this, like how can they identify, the right set of target audience?
I think it's a great question, and I don't have immediate answers. But this is something that we can chalk out once we speak to the clients to understand, where they are in their communications journey. Suppose, for example, like we've we've had clients, we've had founders who have great thoughts, but when I give them a questionnaire, they're unable to put two and two together in order to answer a particular question. That's where probably in-person conversations or maybe calls or frequent visits to the client office and things of that sort help us absorb and understand what sort of potential objective should they have. Then we put the words to their ideas. A client can approach us with a certain sketchy idea. They don't know, say, a go to market strategy, or they don't know the kind of media, as you pointed out, like, everybody wants to reach out to en mass audience. Media alone cannot do that in today's world. Social media will also play a pivotal role. If it's a shoe brand, we might be running ads on Instagram. But if it is, say, a legal firm, I think LinkedIn will do the trick. This is along with the media publications, which forms an important part of the overall communication strategy for brands.
You talked about like how organizations at times, they come to you and they do not necessarily have the clarity in terms of what is it that they want to actually achieve. They might know that okay, we want to engage a PR professional, but they may not necessarily understand what could be those goals like. So can you share a little bit about your experiences to typically what do organizations come to you for? Like maybe if you could outline some examples, that would be great.
I would say, first of all, many organizations approach us and they say, we want to do PR, and for them, PR is equal to a press release. Now, press release is not equal to PR. Let me put that out. That's one thing that we face as a challenge from a requirement standpoint, that hey, this is the write up, push it into the media and get me 50, 60 pieces of coverage. It doesn't work like that in today's generation, and especially post the COVID situation, where a one sided way of communication is not that effective, first of all. Second, many a times press release as a tool, it's a paid platform when it comes to media outlets, and they put out a disclaimer saying that. So, your reach anyway will be very limited and your credibility won't go up. It might just come down because people know you've paid to get there. So that's one problem with understanding PR, press release, and the execution side of things from a reach standpoint. The second is everybody wants to be on the first page of Forbes. Now, I can't do that. And it's very challenging, it's very difficult to sometimes tell them that the kind of work that you are doing should have that sort of merit to organically reach there. Yes, my pitch, my words, my media relations will matter as an individual, as an agency, as a professional, but your work needs to be that authentic and that credible to reach there. And it won't happen in 1 week. It won't happen in a month either in most situations. So, just setting the expectation right
Mm.
from a media and from a client education standpoint is also one of the challenges that we face. So, sometimes there's a mismatch when it comes to expectation and reality. And besides that, one of the things that we encounter is probably familiarity with terminology. So I can say that, hey, Mr. Client, I'll get your authored article published, and they're like, what is that? And will my picture come? Will it be in print? Will it be in digital? Uh, do I have to look a certain way? you know, to contribute an authored article. And I'm like, no, it's your thought that will matter more than your face. So, you know, it's very it's very amusing and it's very challenging to make a client, first of all, be informed enough and ask them that after having gathered this sort of information and knowledge, do you still want to go ahead with public relations? Because these are the tangible results and these are the intangible results. And this is what I can quantify for you. And this is something which I cannot quantify. To simply say, your reputation changing in the mind of an individual from point A to B, I will not be able to quantify it. The
Right.
reach of a particular article or a publication, I can quantify it and I can come back to you with those sort of numbers and matrices and results. So, just to be on the same page from that standpoint, I mean, the client really needs to be a bit patient and appreciative of someone else's time as well when it comes to us putting efforts to make them understand what leap of faith are you going to take, how long will it take, and what results can it potentially have.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, first of all, like educating, the clients is like one part of the job, right? One is obviously to deliver on what you are,
Absolutely.
planning.
Right.
But I think
Right.
even before the project actually starts, like I'm sure a lot of energy goes into educating the client. So, I mean, like from the cases that you have worked from the, work that you have done
Right.
with other organizations, could you share like, some
Sure.
examples of where an organization came to you and how the PR efforts sort of helped them in whatever goals that they had set out.
So, one of the and you had asked this question around the crisis part as well. So, just taking the same answer forward, I think we were approached by Air India post, or I would say almost during the COVID situation, where there was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of chat around HEPA filters and things of that sort. And of course, a lot of mismanagement on ground and with the flights and heckling and people not being able to reach their hometowns and, stuff of that sort. So that's where, we were approached with a crisis communication sort of mandate that, hey, this is happening and it is impacting the repute of the airline. What can you do? And we came up with an idea to focus more in terms of quality and quantity, both the positive side of the story and the positive content, and how this particular airlines, despite all the challenges, is still trying its level best to accommodate the requests coming from the customers and the heavy bookings that they were getting, and the crowd management part, and sorry, the safety part as well during the COVID outbreak. So we engaged with influencers and with media houses, and we told them, why don't you share your personal journey and how this particular airline has played a positive role or a positive part in that journey. We had some hashtags, and eventually we got more than 1 million impressions on that particular campaign. And when the positive stories started to flow on social media platforms and in the media, the negative part or the parts where people were critical, it started to die down on its own, because it was like people were trying to go with the flow, and they understood that a particular hashtag or a particular story is potentially going viral, and it started to influence the way that they were engaging with the brand. So I think that's a real impact we created in a crisis sort of situation, where positive conversations, intelligent content hooks, and potentially, viral content was in one way seeded, on the other it was amplified, and finally it started to resonate. So from a tactical and a strategic standpoint, that's how we approached a crisis communications mandate. So all these small snippets from real life situations, I think that really helped us from a storytelling and a seeding content standpoint. And it turned out to be a beautiful content marketing cum PR mandate for us.
Talking about crisis management, I remember like few years back there was a case of an organization that was based out of Hyderabad, and they work with rescue children. And there
Mhm.
was a story that was done, I think, by one of the international publications. I'm not sure whether it was Reuters or BBC, but they had done a negative story about this organization, how, and they had quoted some of the girls who were rescued as to how they were not treated well. And that story just blew up when the organization started getting calls from their donors that can you clarify, and what is, why is this news being published, and so on. And the organizations just didn't have the means, or they didn't know how to tackle something like this.
Right.
And
That's true.
the response was not, it wasn't ideal. I'm sure they could have done so much better if they had like a proper policy, or some strategy in place as to dealing in such cases. So could you share like your thoughts as to what is it that organizations can do in such cases when there is like bad publicity or bad media, sort of bad press?
I think there should always be some sort of protocol and SOP in place for these just in case sort of situations, which don't happen very frequently. And many a times we also put out, a particular Excel or a Word document saying that, hey, this is your manual when it comes to crisis communications. And clients tend to ignore it because they feel it will not happen, or if it happens, we'll be able to deal with it. So it's the lack of knowledge, or sometimes the arrogance part, that stops them from accepting a particular suggestion that comes from an experienced professional. But having said that, organizations, whether they have a PR person or not, must have some sort of standard protocol in place for these what if situations. And uh, uh, what consists of the process of this protocol is that, first of all, I don't think that they should panic or start sending out hasty statements, which a lot of people do. I think the first step is to just sit back, analyze the situation, think through, and then come up with a solution. The second is that probably a voice of credibility should give a strong statement, which should be very well crafted from the choice of word standpoint as well. So that's two. And third is, of course, ensuring that it reaches out to publications or to platforms that have a good reach. You could be sending out your statement in a magazine that nobody is subscribed to right now, and say that, I've done my job as a copcom or as a PR. You gave me a statement and I've sent it out to the media. Whether it gets picked or not is not my headache. So, that's where, as I said, some sort of sensitivity and sensibility will play a crucial role. And in the case that you are saying, when it comes to criticism from the media, I think one is to also reach out to the person if they have a byline or something and try and understand what their sources were. And second is also to ensure that if your employees are on the same page as far as the statement goes. So your employees are, first of all, they are your micro advocates. And if it's an organization which has even 20, 25, or 100, or thousands of employees, and everyone starts putting out a particular statement, it will create a lot of confusion as to what is the truth and why is this happening, and are things coming from a place of anguish, confusion, or is this something which can be relied upon as a news source? So I think checking with journalists, understanding sources, and ensuring that everybody is speaking the same language within the organization is also pretty important in a crisis communications sort of situation, if anybody gets into that. Uh, Taking accountability when it comes to a crisis, it's a very brave move, and it needs to be thought through very well, and there should be some level of pre-preparedness, I would suggest, if such situations come in. And what are the steps to follow? Because you might be put in such a situation where you're so stressed that you don't know what to do. But if you have a manual, if you have some pre-prepared steps to follow, it just becomes easier, because you might not be consciously thinking about something, but if there is an instruction given to you, at least you can follow it.
Absolutely. I think that's some really useful, tips for organizations. And as you rightly mentioned, I think one thing that organizations generally do not have is that SOP, right? Because no one thinks ये थोड़ी ना होने वाला है. That's the general sort of
That's true.
response, right? कि मतलब why should you invest time and resources into creating something which may or may not happen? That's the general thought process. Yeah, I don't know whether like something like a PR function can be built within an organization. I mean, I'm talking about small and mid-sized organizations.
Mhm.
Of course, large foundations would have, uh, the teams
Larger
and
agency, of
yeah,
course.
and they could even have like someone in-house. But for let's say smaller or mid-sized organizations, is it possible to develop this function, in-house, maybe have their comms person taking up this role as well? And so is it really feasible to have this function like in-house, or you would say that, it's better, for an organization to kind of have an agency or a professional?
I would say that it's better to have an agency or a professional do it. One, as you rightly said, it will require a lot of time, energy, effort. But more importantly, it would require different skill sets. Finding the same thing in one person, it might just be a bit too much. So it's very difficult to find all of these skill sets in one person. And what probably a professional or an agency or even a boutique firm can do for you is have two people, three people who are great with their work, who are specialists in their work, and your POC is a generalist who manages these resources for you. And that's the reason why, like commonsensically, also you should hire somebody who's adept and who's worked in this field for a while. You would want to outsource your sirdardi, why do you want to keep it to yourself and expect one person to do everything, which is practically not possible either. And they might have, like, say, 5 out of those 10 skills, uh, just understanding the tip of the iceberg. They might not know how to make a design if you take away Canva from them.
Correct.
They might not
Yeah.
know how to probably quantify and improvise a campaign, even if you've given them your credit card, the company's credit card, to go run ads. Or, when it comes to media relations, again, different agencies or different individuals have different strengths. So it's critical and it's important to understand what sort of media, not only from a journalist standpoint, but from a niche niche standpoint do they engage in? Might just be worth it, or you should just give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, as you rightly mentioned, like a lot of GDs that even I come across, like for let's say a comms person or for social media, it's like the person needs to be good with content, the person needs to run ads, the person needs to do SEO, the person needs to update the website, the person needs to, create videos, edit them. And I'm like, these are very specialized roles, right? Each one of them, they are specialized, people for that. And like, yeah, as you rightly mentioned, like if you can find someone like that, please send over the details and I would love to hire them, right? I get the same feeling. So I totally resonate with what you're
Right.
saying. Yeah, yeah. I think we are almost at the end of our podcast. I want to ask you if there is any final thoughts or any takeaways that you would like to highlight or mention for organizations in the social space if they are interested in working with an agency or a professional on the public relations front.
I think my final thoughts would be that PR is a slow process. Please have the patience and the trust when you are hiring either an individual or an agency to take your communications mandate forward. The second is, try, if even if it is not perfect, try and filter out your thoughts as much as possible. And the most important question still remains why. So if you don't know what is PR, maybe ask relevant questions or do your own research. Uh, and the last is, as I said, maybe, a little bit of kindness will go a long way, at least in the social sector. A little bit of sensitivity as to the kind of causes that you are dealing with. Please do not go only by catchphrases like, will this go viral or not? You're dealing with the typical niche issues that might require a softer hand or a more sensitive sort of dealing. So please be mindful of it and don't get trapped in the marketing lingo. And maybe with time, people learn to differentiate what's gimmicky and what's actually public relations. That's the only thing.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Viva. It has been a pleasure like speaking to you, and I've learned a lot like in this conversation. So thank you for giving your time for this.
Thank you for the lovely chat, and thanks for having me.